Good afternoon, National Best. Today, what we plan to do is we plan to give you an idea of how Randy McCord does his particular 8.5 by 11 National Best Advantage for licensed representatives. This is fundamentally the same presentation that I give to any licensed representative who's interested in joining National Best. What I do is I give a bit of a history about the industry. I discuss the three models that we generally see in the industry, sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly with regard to each model. And then I explain how National Best as a culture evolved and as a company how we developed and where we are today and why we think we have an advantage over most other MGAs. Normally when I speak to somebody, what I do is I ask permission for 20 to 25 minutes of their time so that I can go over the story of National Best and let them know where we came from. Most of them will agree to this, and depending on the experience of the agent or in which model they currently belong, I'll sculpt the presentation for effect. Let's assume today, though, that we're speaking to somebody who's used to the builder model, or for instance, a model that's representative of companies such as World Financial Group or Primerica, perhaps Canada Strategic, Canada Loyal, some companies that have a sort of a multi-level marketing fundamental structure. They're all a bit different, and some have different attributes, and some provide ownership, some do not, but essentially they're all built upon recruiting and getting a team put together. So I'm assuming that I'm talking to someone from the practice company. So to begin, I would ask them again for permission, and then I would dive right in. So here we go. 20, 30, or 40 years ago, the life insurance industry really had their own sales staff. So for instance, if you worked for Great-West Life, you'd be a representative with Great-West, or London Life, you'd sell London Life products, or if you worked for Manulife, you'd sell Manulife products. What the industry learned years ago was that they're really good at manufacturing products, and that's really what their fundamental business is. So creating critical illness policies, insurance policies, other types of protection products for clients in general. So they eventually realized that sales and distribution really just represented a cost center for them. It didn't really create new business or create new value. It was really just a cost. So when the first brokers came around and said, "Hey, Mr. Insurance Company, we're willing to take that cost on." So in the beginning, we just had some insurance companies, and they decided that they were going to job out to some brokers called managing general agencies, or MGAs. Now there would be a contract between these two companies, and the contract would be how much commission or how much compensation the insurance company would pay to the MGA for selling their products, for selling their policies. Now, the MGAs in turn would hire advisors, and there would be a contract between the advisors and the MGA. So this is really how the industry gets paid, one way or the other. It really doesn't matter who you work for or what kind of company you work for. The flow of commissions and monies paid come via this distribution model. So what is that actual amount of money? Well, let's just use a typical example. Say a term 20 policy for a mid-30s couple covering a $500,000 mortgage. Let's just say that the premium annually was $1,000. Well, that $1,000 premium would then generate commissions, and the commissions would be paid, as I say, from the insurance company to the MGA and then to the advisor. Now, the formula for that commission is first year commission plus a bonus. Now, how does that work? Well, the first year commission is a percentage of the premium that's paid by the client. And for a term policy, most of the insurance companies will pay 40% of that premium plus a bonus. The base bonus for most MGAs, if they don't have volume with the insurance company, is about 180. If you do a lot of volume with the company, then you might get a higher bonus. It might go up to 190, 200. We've even seen 210 or 215 if you do a tremendous amount of business for that particular company. As an example, World Financial Group has a fairly high contract with Equitable because that's what they sell a lot of. They sell a lot of Equitable in Transamerica, as we know. So what that means is that 40% of 1,000 is 400 plus 180% of 400. For those of you who don't do math in your head, I happen to know the number. It's 720. So literally the amount of commission paid is going to be $1,120 for that particular $1,000 contract. Well, that's pretty good. Who gets that money? Well, once again, it depends on the contract between the MGA and the advisor. What we discovered was there were really only 3 models in the industry to pay out that money. So let's take a look at those 3 different models. The first model, which is the one we came from, was called the builder model. The builder model was based around an idea that if you recruited a team, you would be able to build a big business. So really, this is what we call a recruiting model. That's fundamentally how they survive. It's through recruitment. What are some of the good things about it? Well, you can start part-time. You don't have to work full-time. You can keep your day job and see what you think. You can dive into the waters and hopefully that will be helpful. Well, what about teamwork? That's another great advantage of the builder model, is that because it's a recruiting model, you work in teams. So often you have a number of different mentors or coaches. Your upline helps you with your development, with your training. And so from that perspective, it's not a bad model. What about training? Well, this is where there are some question marks, simply because training in these models isn't consistent across the country usually. They don't usually have national types of training. They have training locally, and the training is really branch specific. So if you happen to be in a branch that had really great trainers or highly experienced people doing a great job, you might get great training. If you were in a base shop that maybe didn't have great trainers and maybe weren't organized as much as they should be, well, you might not get the kind of training that's really going to help you develop in the industry. So training's a bit questionable for sure. Compensation. Well, compensation is one of the real problems with this model. There are just too many levels to pay. There can be upwards of 17 levels in these multi-level marketing models, or builder models as we call them. Well, that represents a real problem because if you can't pay somebody enough to start out, well, they're not likely to stick around, particularly when the only way for them to get a higher contract is to recruit, right? Without recruiting, they can't get a higher contract. They're stuck where they are, so they're forced to go and talk to their friends, their family, their acquaintances, people at the bus stop, people in the bank lineup, just to try and recruit people to get a higher contract. So some people just aren't into that kind of thing, and that limits the kind of people that you're going to get into the model, and it limits their ability to create higher income. There's a more fundamental problem with these models, though, and that fundamental problem is no ownership. They claim that you have ownership, but the fact of the matter is that there is no ownership. And in fact, if you ever leave this model, you leave everything behind. Their contracts essentially state that the company owns the recruits and the clients and even lists of people that you gave your upline. So you have to be careful with this model. Read the contract and understand fully if and when, if ever, you even have any control over your book of business, which is pretty, I think it's pretty iffy. I don't think there's really any ownership in these models particularly. However, that being said, you still can build a big business if you have enough recruits and you build a big enough team, and if you're happy there and don't want to leave, move your book. However, what about selling your book? Well, they're sort of making an accommodation for that, but it's very specific, and it has to do with certain quota levels, a certain level of contract within the company. It gets pretty dicey. It's not really clear in a lot of cases, and it's certainly not built to be able to move. Once they get you, they want to keep you. And once you're in that model and you've spent enough time and energy, it doesn't seem like a great place to escape from, because you're going to lose everything. However, it's a lot of fun socially, so some people just hang around because they like hanging out with the team, and that's fine and dandy. So what does the starting representative make with this particular model? Well, we know one model particularly, the contract turns out that it'll be about $259 that the rep will make for selling this $1,000 contract. Well, we have to say that that's really not a lot of money, and it really doesn't represent the kind of money that you're going to survive on or going to be able to make a living on. In fact, just paying the gas to go to and from the client, doing the paperwork, paying for some faxes, what's going to happen is you're not going to last long. So you're going to have to recruit. You really don't have a choice. The second model is the captive model. The captive model represents companies that have a specific set of products and processes that they use for people. I like to call these the branded companies, because most of them have spent a lot of money on branding and marketing. And the fact of the matter is that the captive model is well known by a lot of people. There are some famous names such as Investors Group or Sun Life, Freedom 55. These companies do a lot of branding and advertising, and that's why we know them so well. Of course, where does that money come from for advertising? Well, you guessed it. It comes from here. It comes from this particular compensation. So again, that's coming out of the back pocket of the advisor. What are some of the good things about this? Well, the good things are that they have really good training. They do have comprehensive training. They send you away usually to some place where you get the same training as all the other reps. So from that perspective, it's a good situation. Again, the branding is good. Most people will have heard of these companies. So when you go out with your business card, oh yeah, I know that company. They advertise on TV. So that makes it a fairly interesting company to work for. Again, the issue is they have a set number of products that are limited. Now, this can be a good thing in that it focuses you as a salesperson and allows you to kind of focus in on some product. Problem is, it may not be the best thing for the client, because if that particular product isn't the one the client needs, or if there's a better product out there, you may not have access to it. That's pretty much the same problem over here, too. Most of the builder models claim to be brokers, but very few of them are true brokers. I mean, we know that at the practice company, for instance, we really just sold Transamerica and Equitable. I mean, Primerica is pretty awful. They sell extremely expensive term insurance and then tell people to invest in their dismally performing mutual funds. So, how is the client being served in these cases? This is a question. Are the clients being served well? So training, the product's limited. Here you have to work full time. You have no choice. In the captive model, they get you mutual fund licensed, then they get you life licensed. You got to quit your job. They throw you in the deep end, and they say, well, sink or swim, buddy. Yeah, they do give you a little mentorship, and they do have managers that help out, but when push comes to shove, there's the phone book, start making calls. And if you can make it, that's fantastic, and if you can't, well, that's too bad. They have about a 70% attrition rate. So 70% attrition in first year. Lots of guys don't make it through the first year. It's just a tough go. They have fairly high desk fees. We know in the old model, we used to pay tech fees, might be $75, $80 a month, something like that. Here, it's more like $500 to $600 a month. Very expensive to hang out in this model. They expect you to sell high net worth clients. In this model, they tell you, gee whiz, we're servicing the middle class, and we do that with big teams. Here, they don't even make a pretense of that. The only way you're going to make big money here is with high net worth. That's it. The only way you increase your business is high net worth. Why? Because once again, no ownership. Oh yes, I know, Sun Life will vest you after 8 years, and maybe Freedom 55 will start vesting you after 5 or 6 years. Investors Group, you're never vested. So again, the ownership's a real issue here. You can't just go and get 50 or 60 clients and walk away. They won't let you. It's part of their contract. They keep the clients. It's a captive model. You're captive to their system and their process. And again, you're limited to the number of products you can sell your client. But it attracts people because of the branding. The names are familiar. And again, these companies do actively recruit. Why do they recruit? Well, they have to run through 10 guys to get 3 good ones in their model. So they're constantly telling stories about how wonderful it is and selling the dream just about as much as these folks sell the dream of huge amounts of wealth with your great big team. So here you need a huge team. Here you need high net worth clients, because you can only service about 250 of them. And of course, as you get more experienced and can get higher net worth clients, all your B and C and D clients will start to fall by the wayside, and you won't service them anymore. These fellas start off with an FYC plus 50 contract approximately, so they're going to make somewhere between $500 and $600 for that contract over here, which isn't too bad. You know, not quite enough to make a living. You'd have to sell a couple of these a week to make a decent living. But these models tell you, hey, you shouldn't be selling this contract anyway. You shouldn't even bother. You should be getting $2,500 to $5,000 in commission every single sale. That's what you should target. Don't be targeting these guys. So again, the captive model is specific to high net worth. It really doesn't function for middle class Canadians and doesn't serve them well. The final model is the independent model. Now the independent model is just like it says. What they've done is found some independent MGAs that support advisors who have experience and advisors who can kind of take care of themselves. They understand the products, they understand the paperwork process and the paper flow, and so although they get some back office support and they get some support with regard to quotes and illustrations and some compliance help as well, they're basically on their own. They have to manage things themselves, and they have to keep up with trends, they have to keep up with training. These MGAs will provide training from the suppliers, so from that perspective it's good. And in fact, they have access to all the providers. This is one of the great advantages of this particular model, access to all providers. There's limited support, but you're supposed to know what you're doing here. Here you're a lone wolf, you're on your own, so you should be able to take care of yourself and work your own business. So limited support, you get access to all the providers. You also get a pretty good contract. Base contract here is like FYC plus 100. Nowadays, because they're trying to attract more members, sometimes they'll start you at 110, 120 even. But here at least you're making $800 for this contract. That's not bad. You can make a living doing this. You can actually survive with a contract a week, make a decent living, and build your practice, and over time, build it up to the point where you've got good residual income. So that's what attracts people here. Usually after they've been through these grinders, they discover this particular model, and a lot of people will move from these models to this model, particularly for the higher contract, for the greater access to product. But there's another reason why too. Once you get up to a certain level of production, you might be able to convince your MGA that you should set up an AGA or an associate general agency. And they might give your agency an FYC plus 180 contract. Remember, that's the base contract for an agency. Basically, you're going to make that without having to hit quota. And so you set up your own little agency and you actually hire some fellas. And you might pay them FYC plus 80, FYC plus 100, maybe FYC plus 120 because this guy's a really good producer. And what happens is the business that you set up, you take the spread on these fellows, and that allows you to rent an office and hire a receptionist, have a phone system, and put up your own shingle. I might call it Randy McCord's Insurance Company, or, McCord Financial. That's fantastic. Now I'm running my own business. I'm an actual business owner. Now I can grow. I can get some more reps if I want. Maybe I can set up situations where these guys can bring in reps and get an override. Whatever system I want to set up, I can set up within this context. So the associate general agency is a viable way to grow my business, right? Because once again, you can only handle 200, 250 clients, and after that, you're hitting your head on the glass ceiling. You can't make any more money unless you go to higher net worth. It's the same problem as over here. But here, at least, now you can set up your own business. You can set up a shop. Well, what's the problem with that? Well, I can tell you. The problem with that is now you have all the headaches. You have to do compliance. You need to set up the back office and computer systems. You're the one who has to make payroll. All of the headaches of running a small business and being an entrepreneur are a part of this business. But there are further issues that can crop up as well. What about when this fella has a great month and he finds out this fella's making FYC plus 120? Well, what's this fella going to want? Well, I can tell you what he wants. He's going to want this contract, and he's going to come to you and ask for it. And what you're going to have to say is, well, you've only been with me 6 months. He's been with me 3 years. Yeah, but I just did a bang-up production in the last 2 months. I want a higher contract. Well, you don't want to lose him, so you probably negotiate something, and maybe you get him up to 100 or 110. Well, then this fella finds out about it, and he says, look, I've been here longer than him. How come I don't get a higher contract? This fellow, in the meantime, he's looking around, and what does he really want? I mean, what does this guy really want? Well, I can tell you what he really wants. He wants that. He wants to go set up his own shop. And eventually, when he gets enough experience, that's exactly what he does. Sets up his own shop, and he takes him with, and this poor fella is left holding the bag, trying to reestablish his business, trying to get some new recruits. And essentially what he did was he trained his competition. And that's not unlike any other business in Canada. Everybody wants more. Everybody wants to be the owner. And so this model has some serious defects from that perspective. So after those of us who formed National Best were out looking for a sponsor back in 2010, this is the model that we came across. This is what we saw in the industry. And we said to ourselves, well, this is not good, because we don't really like any of these models particularly. I mean, Harwinder and I really like this model, but we knew its shortcomings, of course. We didn't really like this model much at all. It seemed to be too restrictive. And this model seemed pretty good, except that you were on your own. You really didn't have the kind of support or teamwork that you got over here. So that's the time at which we sat down in the fall of 2010, and we started to mull over, what are the best companies here? Like, what do these companies have that we want? Of course, Harwinder, our president, being an engineer, in fact, being one of the first engineers on the CNRL Horizon project, so we're talking about a pretty smart fella here, he decided we should put this on a spreadsheet, like all engineers do. And so across the top of the spreadsheet, he wrote all of the names of the insurance companies. And down the side of the spreadsheet, he wrote all the attributes that we thought were good about that company. And then at the very last column, we had a best column. And that listed all the really good qualities so that we could compare back and see which of the companies came close to being the best in our mind. Of course, when we did compare, we couldn't actually find anything that was perfect. So we sat down and thought, well, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? How are we going to find a place for our licenses? When suddenly Manjeet, one of Harwinder's teammates, piped up and said, well, why don't we form our own company? Everybody thought that this would be a fairly interesting idea. And we decided that we would move forward with that idea and just see what it took to build our own actual insurance brokerage. Well, it took an awful lot of work, truth be told, and through the fall of 2010, we started to gather together some of our old team from the practice company and convince them to come on board, and we got people that were able to write policy documents, and Harwinder set up the company, and we started to evolve the culture that we wanted. We ran into Mike Chapman, of course, who was instrumental in allowing us to set up in a way that was going to be sustainable and to provide the training that we thought was going to be necessary to really provide customers with the best of the best, because we wanted access to all of those companies. We wanted a company that provided ownership from day one, right? Because the only model that contains ownership is the independent model. Here you actually get ownership. You can take your business from one MGA to another. And we said to ourselves, that's what we want. We want freedom for our advisors. We don't want to have them in a captive situation. We don't want to have them in a model where it just doesn't work for them from a business perspective. And it's too much work just to get up the scale of contracts. So we said, no, we want to invent something different. And this is where the bright minds started to really loosen up. We have a couple of scotches and started to brainstorm, and we sat down and we looked at the situation, and with Mike's and Harwinder's vision and Maria's and Dan's and mine and everybody's input and some thoughts and some process, we said, hey, you know what? I think we've got the answer to this. From the perspective of the builder model, we need to condense this model. We need to make it a lot tighter. And so here's what we did. 4 contracts only. 60%, 72, 85, and 100. Now what about overrides? 3 only. 8, 4, and 2. Well, why didn't we make it as big and as deep as these ones are? Well, because you can still make a fantastic, fantastic business without having 17 levels of pay, without having to distribute the commission money so thin that the guys at the bottom don't make a living. Our guys at the bottom of this scale make $511 for exactly the same contract versus the old practice company. So now at least they've got enough to make a bit of a living, particularly if they're working part-time. They're making as much as the captive model dudes are who have to work full-time. So there's an opportunity to build your business, to sort of test the waters and see what you like about the business. Now, how do you progress up here? Well, we decided we'd make it really easy. 10,000 points or 10,000 in premium is going to get you from this contract to this contract. Really easy. You don't have to recruit anybody. Don't need to recruit, no problem. To get from this one to the next one, you do need to recruit 3 licenses and do 30K of business in a 4-month rolling period. Again, that's not too tough when you think it's all 4 of you together, right? Your 3 licenses and you have to do 30K in 4 months. Well, that's not very much. That's less than 10,000 a month. Way less than 10,000 a month, in fact, per individual. So we think that's a very doable system. And again, to go from 85 to 100% contract, it's 6 licenses and 60K over a 4-month rolling period. So again, we think that we've got a model that allows people to progress up the scale of contract to be able to actually make a decent living. I mean, let's face it, by the time you're at an 85 contract with your 3 licenses, you're making as much as an SMD is with WFG. I mean, you're doing really well. Your contract is fantastic, and all you've done is 3 licenses and 30K over 4 months. That's doable. We think that this is possible. Now, why only 6 licenses to get to the top contract? Well, Dan and Harwinder and I all come from the corporate sector, so we knew that 6 direct reports was about all any manager or any CEO can handle. More than 6 direct reports, and you just get lost in the shuffle. So you really want 6 strong full-time licenses. That's all you need to build this business. That's going to be enough. And if they are each recruiting 2, because they should each have 3 recruits, then you're off to the races. You're going to be making great money. And of course, our compensation calculators will show you that. So then you get to the 100% contract. And of course, then if someone spins out and they start their own agency, you get 8% on that first generation, 4 on the second, and 2 on the third. Well, again, if you've actually built an organization that's that big and that deep, you're going to be making fantastic money. You know, if everybody's selling one of these a week, you're going to be in the $250,000 to $500,000 range a year. Well, that's what we all aspire to, and we think we've got a model that's going to allow that to happen. But let's just say you're in this model, and after a year, the only person you recruited was your mom. And Mom really only sold a contract to Uncle Sue and Aunt Betty. And you know, you love your mom, but you couldn't seem to recruit anybody else. And it didn't matter who you talked to or whether you got Randy involved or not. You know, we just couldn't seem to bring anybody else on board. And so you look at me and you go, you know, Randy, I kind of feel bad about this, but the fact of the matter is that, you know what? I think I'd be better off in this independent model. Well, you might be. And this brings us a little bit to the pay and how it happens. Because National Best wanted to have contracts with all the insurance companies. We believed it was our mandate to be able to provide clients with the best possible service, bar none. So we wanted to have access to all those contracts, which means we had to have some contracts through a couple of different MGAs, including some direct contracts ourselves. But in order to do that, the best we could do was to take that FYC plus 180 contract, because we didn't want to have quota with the insurance companies. So that's the base contract. If we devoted ourselves to one company, we could get this up, and we plan to do that as we grow across the country. But in the meantime, this is the base contract. Now, National Best has to run, so we take 20 points for admin, back office, payroll. That's what National Best as a company actually uses to run the company, which is really a shoestring. I mean, if it weren't for Harwinder and Jagdeep, we probably wouldn't be able to do this, which means that we pay FYC plus 160 to the field. Now that's what we pay to the field. Now that's actually more than many other companies, because we don't have all of the overhead, and we also don't do advertising. We don't retain earnings. We're a flow-through corporation, and we act as a cooperative. All of the agency owners get together and we make decisions that are going to help the whole, not just their own shop. So we run under a different kind of model. It's a different kind of decision-making process. But that being said, that still pays. That's what pays the money to the field and why it works so well. But let's just say the fellow says, you know what, Randy, I think I'm better off in this independent model. Well, we went, yeah, I think you're right. I think you should try that. So we decided we should develop an independent model. So our independent model, oh well, you get the idea. We decided we'd start off a rookie here at FYC plus 120. That gives him a great contract. It gives him, excellent compensation. He'll be able to make a living right off the bat. Now, he won't be able to build one of these, but that's okay. This may be where he does his best work anyway, if he's not a recruiter. So now he's got the opportunity to be able to make a really high contract like the independents, still have access to all the product. That's one of our mandates. Plus, we'll get him up to a contract of 150 without too many efforts. He's just got to do some production and prove that he or she can get out there and sell, get some contracts under his belt, and that means as an independent, he'll be able to really thrive if he's a good producer. So your question should be, well, what happened to the other 10 points? If we pay FYC plus 160 to the field, and that's the highest contract for an independent, where did the other 10 points go? Well, we still want to be a growing company. I mean, when we say we want to be the largest financial services company in Canada, we mean that. So what we want to do is we want to be able to say, hey, if you bring somebody into this model, we'll give you a 10% override on their business. So that means that they're still able to bring some people in. They're not required to train them particularly, although you might do a little bit of training and a little bit of referral business. But at least it gets you the opportunity to still bring somebody into the team and get a little bit of an override on them, even if you don't have to oversee them, because, of course, they're independents. Not a problem. So what if I brought somebody from Investors Group into this model, and suddenly they said to me, well, Randy, I just talked to 3 of my buddies, and they really want to move from this model, and they really want to come over here. But you talked them into this model. They're going to come over into this business model here, the agency model. And I said, well, good for them. And he goes, well, yeah, but I'm over here. I don't get anything from them, do I? I go, no, sorry, you don't. You're in the independent model. You're on your own, right? You're not in this team building model. Well, could I switch over here? And then would I get to override those guys? Well, yeah, if you made that decision right now, why not? We're not trying to tell you which model to be in. We want you to be in the model where you're going to be successful, the model that's most natural for you, the model that makes the most sense to you, and where your business acumen is best utilized. So the fact of the matter is, we don't really care which model you're in. We give you options for both. You still have access to all the companies and all the products. Fantastic. Pick a model that you like. Pick one that is best for you. So again, we've created a hybrid. We've created a company that takes the best of all three of these and tries to combine them into one single model. Well, that's fantastic, but what about this dude? What about that guy, that poor guy who's trying to build his business, doing the best he can, and unfortunately, it doesn't quite work for him? Well, we say to him, hey, why don't you get rid of your headaches, your compliance, your payroll, your back office? Why don't you just come and plug into our system? Join the National Best Business Network. And they go, oh, well, now you want me to join National Best, I'm going to have to use your name, and you're going to want me to do all your thing, and you're going to want me to do this. And we go, no. We think that, if you branded yourself, if McCord Financial is a well-known name in Calgary, why would we want you to change? Keep your name. We don't want you to change your name. You'll just be a member of the National Best Business Network, that's all. And we'll provide all the back office and support. And your guys here, they can pick which model they want, so it doesn't really matter. You're still going to get overrides. You're still going to make money. And by the way, you'll make money forever because they won't need to go anywhere, because they'll be able to build their businesses based upon these other two models and be perfectly happy. Well, you mean we've solved that problem too? Holy cow. Took the best of three worlds, put some thought behind it, created something new, something innovative. That's what we're about. EIEIO, empowerment through inspiration, education, innovation, and ownership. That's one of our taglines. And, we believe in that. We believe in innovation. In fact, we believe in innovation so much that guess what? Ownership from day one. Access to all products. Best compensation for advisors. Best service to clients. What more do we want? What more could we do? Well, I got to tell you, I had an advisor in this model, and he kept bugging me. He kept saying to me, Randy, if I'm here and I do 30,000 points in 4 months all by myself, how come I can't have this 85% contract? And I said, well, gee, it's because it's a builder model. You can't just have it. You got to get 3 recruits too. You got to get those 3 licenses on board. That's how this model works, how it functions. He goes, but why? Why do I have to do that? How come if I do 30K myself in 4 months, I can't have that contract? And I tried to argue with him, but he was a persistent fella. Probably one of the reasons I like him. One of the reasons he was on my team. He said, well, all I have to do is license 3 monkeys. They don't have to sell anything. If I do it all myself, I still get the contract, right? I went, well, yeah, your logic's correct. I'll tell you what, I'll bring it to council. And so, again, we're a cooperative, so I got to bring this before council and say, hey, guys, this is what my buddy Sean is talking about. Does this make any sense to you guys? And everybody was a little sort of skeptical at first, but Harwinder, of course, being the engineer, said, let me take it home and put it on the spreadsheet. So sure enough, that's what he did. Took it home, put it on the spreadsheet, came back the next week and said, he's right. There's no reason why we can't provide a higher contract if you actually hit the numbers. The one thing you won't get, though, is you won't get an override on any recruits you bring in until you've still fulfilled the obligation. However, what it meant is you could get all the way to the 100% contract without ever recruiting anybody. So you could actually stay in this model if you wanted to and still get to a pretty high contract. And fantastic. That's what we call innovation. One other thing about this model, most of these other models say that once you get to this highest contract, you're required to give up one of your legs, one of your producing legs, because that's how you pay your upline for all the wonderful support that they gave you while you work like a dog to get that contract. Well, in our model, there's no give up leg. We just don't believe in it. No give up leg. We believe that you should keep what you build. If you build the house, you should get to live in it. Another innovation that we think is going to be fundamental to creating a lot more successful advisors in this particular model. So that's the story of National Best. That's the story of where we came from. That's the story about what we developed and where we're going. Well, that's up to you. If you want to tag along and be a pioneer in one of the most innovative financial services companies in Canada, I would certainly invite you to come out to one of our training sessions and read over our membership agreement. And I think it's time to give it a try to somebody that's going to be innovative and is going to provide you with the best support in the industry and the best compensation in the industry today. So what do you say?